I clicked the wrong button then. I almost started the opening music again. Welcome back to another episode, my lords, ladies and gentlemen. I hope this finds you well and that Friday is treating you famously. We're going to jump straight in with the topics for today, given that it's all deliverables around neuroscience, consciousness, and these deeper concepts. But do not worry, it's not jargon heavy. It's just something that we sought to be important for discussion when it comes to the understanding of the way that humans work and how we can pay attention and learn to specific areas to try and figure out more about the behavioural patterns and what they may or may not mean. This comes from this topic. That is, comes from the Journal of Behavioural Science's most recent edition, and in it they touch on topics like stress, resilience, brain evolution, consciousness. These are direct quotes, signalling that behavioural science is increasingly interfacing with neuroscience and more fundamental human science questions. This broadening means behaviours aren't just what people do, but involve deeper mechanisms like neuroelectric fields and brain dynamics, but it's especially useful for high-stakes human performance, resilience, and threat management contexts, which we will face in our day-to-day activities. So really what we're looking at is the behaviorally scientific version of what comes first, the chicken or the egg. You know, we could argue that there are things happening in here that are unbeknownst to us consciously at any one given time, and then it manifests in the behavior that we take. Or it could be argued that because of the behavior that we're taking, that causes certain programs and patterns to happen. Our position is that the more we learn about how the brain works, the more insight that we can get into the behavioural conduct of the humans that we interact with. Is that about right, sir?
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, behavior isn't just about choices. It's about the neural circuits, the threat perception when we're in high stakes situations, and the body's predictive systems. So if we're talking about particularly when we get under threat, then obviously survival architecture comes into play. So the amygdala takes the lead, shuts off the prefrontal cortex, and the motor and sensory systems move more about speed than precision. So it's very important.
Yeah, massively, and this matters now because the field itself is expanding because of this. You know, the scientific areas are very much crossing over. So when we start to explore neural pathways to resilience, it's leveraging the neuroscience that it's connected to, which emphasizes neurobiological pathways as essential for targeted interventions. Right, so the connection here, when you look at it from an executive protection, or even just to use that most ambiguous of terms, security position, you're often dealing with human systems under stress. So if you have an idea as to which of our neural systems are supporting the adaptive responses that you see, you can design your training around that. You can design movement protocols around that. You can design your culture around that. You can design your actions, your de-escalation procedures, all around these areas. For example, simply knowing that the amygdala is under active use. Under mass conductivity, lots of action going through there. Somebody's capacity for critical, rational thought is diminished by default purely because of the action within that. So spotting activity that has a root in the amygdala, I know a little bit more about how I can de-escalate or interact with this person, or dare I use that most triggering of terms, read this person, based on my knowledge of how they are likely thinking at that particular stage, just because I have a meager understanding of what the patterns are in here, and then what their effects are. And as always, with that phrase that we love, behavior not being binary, that doesn't mean they are acting that way by default. It just means I have an informed entry point with which to validate, dismiss, or clarify if their critical thinking is actually lessened, is targeted, and is stressed in that situation. From you, Bob, the classic is of it's freeze, fight, and flight for stress responses. Is it that simple?
No, not really. I think what we need to go into is the two circuits, the fear circuit and the control circuit, or as it's better known, bottom up processing and top down processing.
That's it.
So the amygdala is the fight, freeze, fight, and flight, but it's also appease as well. So in certain situations, people just give up. So I think that's a more modern understanding, is that there is another part to it, but it's like the alarm bell. It happens before our conscious brain becomes aware of it. It's why people jump at the ghost train or whatever. And then you've got the control one that is the executive oversight that comes in later, but it kicks in later. And so it all, I remember going back to the police days of when you interview people, don't overload them in the first 30 seconds or minute, because they're just readjusting and they're fighting that urge for the amygdala is twitching and putting them in a place where you don't want them to be. You want them to be comfortable if you're going to talk to people or you're going to deal with people, and getting them to that place is where you want to start. And it is activating their ability to put conscious thought to the actions that are happening around them. And it's very difficult. It's
Mm,
it's how because it's happening on both parties, isn't it? Even
yes.
in the executive protection, it's happening to both people.
Mm,
So they're both on high arousal,
mm,
and the energy is feeding back and forward between them. And it
mm,
only needs one agent within that to
mm,
be tipping it one way. And if you're not careful, both will go that way. They'll
absolutely.
misread, misinterpret, and you're on a hide into nothing then, or whatever. It will never work. It's a
Absolutely.
broken communication, if you want to call
Absolutely.
it that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that it connects to here is the wonderful virtue of resilience. It's
Mm,
a particularly malleable mindset that is enacted when you're under stress, because if I might be, quite semantic about it, you're either going to deal with the stress or you're not, right? And how far your capacity is tasked in that situation is connected to how resilient you are. The evolution of brain plasticity and resilience for humans dealing with threat, change, uncertainty. It's a requirement for adaptable neurosystems. A recent study actually found that heightened juvenile-like plasticity in mice correlated with greater resilience to unpredictable stress. Brain plasticity has these critical periods. How adult brains may lose some of that plasticity, and therefore what that means for resilience if it's not practiced. So essentially what we're saying in the navigation of all of the neurotransmitters and hormones that are involved in building resilience, in order to be able to bring some more critical thought to potentially stressful environments and potentially stressful situations, is a practiced behavior. The one that I see a lot, and I'd like to hear the one that you hear as well, is about the amount of time somebody has. I didn't have enough time, and if the task is like, I don't know, 5 or 6 hours, whatever it is, like I didn't have time to do the garden.
Mm.
I could understand that because it's not just a simple thing to go out and pull up a couple of weeds and then job done. There is the trimming and the collections and the brushing and the tools and making sure all of the electrics are set up and then preparing for weather, etc., etc., etc. It's a big thing. So when I always ask everybody the same thing, and it's words to the effect of, well, how can you have time if you don't take it? And that's not my idea. I stole that from the second Matrix film. I just thought it was I just thought it was particularly apt. If
Mm.
it is that the day got away from you and you favoured sitting down and watching television for a little bit, own it.
Yeah.
It's not that you didn't have time. You chose to do that to regenerate, to take care of yourself. And you build a lot of those excuses, and it means that in the face of a stress, your reflexive response is for the reason why you didn't do something or couldn't do something. It's the locus of control from psychology, and your capacity for resilience goes down because there's no ownership of whatever it is
Yeah.
that's out there in front of you. That's the one I encounter a lot when it comes to the mindset around it. How about yourself? Have you got any a repeated exposures to a lack of resilience or an abundance of resilience? Too
Yeah.
much.
I think from my perspective, I was only thinking about this the other day, and I'm going to give a presentation on it next week. But the fact of it is that we are too stupid for our brain. Our brain is too complex for us to comprehend in a lot of instances. And it's in a way, it's like giving a Formula One car to a 70-year-old novice driver and not expecting it to crash on the first bend. Because we are dealing with something that's really, really advanced, and so advanced that we don't really understand it fully. Even the scientists don't. It's like, I suppose it's like going on the Amazon and buying a cheap air fryer that's got all the things that you want. It does all this and does all that, and then you get the manual and it's in Chinese and you can't understand it. That's a bit like us trying to work our brain and work out the brain. And so what happens with the brain is that when it comes to fear versus control, performance drops off. It just goes into emergency uh, response systems, and fear dominates. And when fear dominates, it closes down to our bare reptilian almost responses, doesn't it? And so understanding that you're going to see that it's not going to be someone's going to be really outrageously different. But if you are trained to do it, you will see that their responses are coming from either control or fear. And certainly in the terms of executive protection, if you're in an high stakes situation, the chances are it's going to be fear.
Massively. And we could talk about the review of building resilience. It's a driving force that shows your catecholamines of dopamine, of norepinephrine, glucocorticoids, how that modulates neurocognition and plasticity under stress. We could look at its work with the plasticity of neural function in mice as it compares to human neuroimaging. That's what we read about in terms of practice. That
Yeah.
it's the recognition that behavior in threat contexts doesn't really start at the decision moment. It
No.
begins with the capacity and the state that the individual's in. Like, for example, if a stressful situation arises, like God forbid an active shooter scenario or something as equally unpleasant and on that scale, but before it happens, someone is already on edge. Somebody is already an anxious individual for whatever reason, and then that happens, their capacity to think rationally about their personal safety in that particular situation is diminished even more than the people starting at, kind of the base level for the context, whatever that would be, content, happy, well fed, whatever. Whereas this is how you can talk about things like stress inoculation, for the guys that deal with these war zones and scenarios that are as high stakes and high threat as that on a daily basis. Does that mean that they don't experience stress or threat? Absolutely not. Most of the guys that I've spoke to, and I'm sure you know a few yourself, Bob, that if their comfort zones are the war zones, but if they have to stand up and speak in front of 20, 30 people, they are on edge. They are in threat assessment mode because there is no capacity for the state of their neural processing to deal with all of the information that's there. So you lean on resilience to try and process things more clearly. You're looking at the navigation of all those synaptic changes, all that circuitry rewiring, the critical period windows. You can look at all of that, but essentially it's how you lean in to the stress and work with it that tells you how much you're going to be able to think clearly in those moments. And that's just as applicable if you're facing an exam, or you're about to give presentations, or you're about to go and walk your patrol, at 12 a.m. around the derelict car park that you're the night watchman for, or if you're protecting the president. Stress is a personal situation. How you manage it is a particular reflection of how you've processed your environments up until that stage. Like, have you ever watched those jump scare videos where people do like
Yeah.
the big noises? You see the amount of people that just freeze or jump or run
Yeah.
or stop or aren't bothered. Me and my wife went to Edinburgh for a birthday a couple of days ago, and we went to the dungeons. And it's
Oh,
they do all like the acting out of all of the torture mechanisms, and the story of Mary Shelley and Frankenstein, and then Frankenstein gets loose, and then there's all of these things happening, and the people that are in that environment who are simply thinking, well, it's dark, I can't see. These are the people that were jumping. These are the people that had the unexpected happen in front of them, and they reacted accordingly with that kind of
yeah.
freeze, flight, fight, fawn, tend, all of the other stuff that comes out. But in those situations, myself, my wife, because we've done the dungeons a lot, we like that type of that type of history. It's a quirky exposure. So we're seeing the actors set everything up as they're going through their show, so that when it comes to lights off, we are a little bit further ahead. We don't know, obviously, what's going to happen, but we're a little bit further ahead as to the likelihood. So when this
Yeah.
person jumps out from behind the corner, or they tap you on the knee in the dark, it isn't engaging those systems because we've entertained the information that's there as a rational connection to how we are dealing with our own processes at that moment. And I think that's such a wonderful topic for everyone to get involved in who's a fan of behavioral science. It's not just about learning the outside reflections as a connection to the in. It's about learning the connection to the in as it reflects to the outside as well. You know, uh, that's the. Oh, I think you froze, Bob. Um, well, um, there we go. While Bob returns, we'll jump back to this. um, Building off that, if we look at executive protection demands, the features like a cognitive flexibility, rapid adaptation, recovery from stress, they are neural features. right? They're not just a soft skill. It can be practiced. It can be learned. My main problem with all of the mindfulness books and courses that I've experienced, which hasn't been them all, it's been a lot of them, but it hasn't been them all. They've all boiled down to things like be more mindful. Okay, how? And there are similar reflections that you can argue from this particular discussion. We're talking about the wonderful benefit of resilience and all of these all of these neuroscientific connections to it, but you might be left thinking, okay, how do I do that? And you can start with simply taking stock of exactly what you do when you're stressed. Right? It doesn't have to start with, embodiment or somatics or anything like that. It can start with the acknowledgement. All right, I'm stressed. My heart rate's going a little fast, and I'm not giving things the time that they need to properly explore them and think through them. You need to slow down your thinking. Cool. That is job one. Simply acknowledging that you are stressed and not putting it off, right? Because when you are stressed, your critical capacity is diminished, and that's the time that you learn bad behaviors. You learn the wrong diagnosis of the situation that you're in, and run away with a granular outcome that is completely factually incorrect, right? So start with those acknowledgements in that particular situation, and then forgive me, I'm still getting over a cold. It's quite a dry cough I've got. Um, and then at those moments, you want to look at what your actions are. What are you doing? Right? What is your state? Have you acknowledged that you're stressed because you're stood still? Have you acknowledged that you're stressed because your breathing's really shallow or quick, or you're tensing your jaw, or you're bouncing around the room like a headless chicken? Whatever it is, there are different states that are connected to the different outputs in relation to stress. So find out which one is particular to yours, because the way that you deal with that and mitigate those situations and those behavioral responses to stress will be different from person to person. So it can start with something as simple as, all right, if you are running around like a headless chicken, slow it down forcefully. Like, no one's saying stop. That's putting brakes on your behavior that is really going to cause more problems than it's solved until you've expanded your ability to think. So slow it down. How you do that is particular to you. If it is that you've noticed that you've stood still, you've frozen, start moving. It doesn't necessarily matter where at that stage, so long as it's safe and appropriate to move into that particular location. That's You're looking at expanding your capacity to think. There's that Viktor Frankl quote about the space between stigma and response. There is a pause. That's not word for word, but it's that idea. So stigma and response, stigma fear, stigma stress, stigma whatever it is, outcome to stressful situation. I didn't have time, I wasn't thinking clearly, oh, that wasn't me. All are factually not true. They are your interpretations of a stressful situation that best suit your feelings. So it's interacting with those moments and looking to give you a way to widen that space between stigma and response so you can think a little bit more clearly about it. Does it start with something as simple as taking a few deep breaths? Absolutely. If that's what calms you down, fabulous. And then it's about developing resilience with your critical reflection of that stressful situation. Did I handle that in the best way that I could have? If you can actively, confidently, 100% say, yes, I did. Okay, source evidence for it from other people or other things that you interacted with at that stage. Fabulous. If it turns back that they disagree with your 100% successful experience, lean into that. These are where your resilience These are where your resilient behaviors are built, and your mindset, your capacity for thinking, reacts accordingly. Whatever the challenge is I face on a day-to-day basis, whether it's small or massive, I do my best as a human being to run at it head forth. Does it always pay off? No, absolutely not. But in those moments, I am always looking to try and learn a little bit more about my resilient capacity to think through the situation that's just caused me stress or anxiety or anger or whatever it is in those particular moments. Right, so we felt that it was a particularly scientific reflection of All Hallows Eve, which it is today. So happy Halloween if it is that you're celebrating it, and if you're currently hiding behind the door frame to the other room, looking to jump out and scare someone. Maybe you can use that as an opportunity to practice your observation and your critical thinking skills as well. If you are, like all people here, a power dork. So if you got anything out of this, guys, do let us know in the comments section below. I'm sure Bob will be back. The weather in England is absolutely atrocious. So I infer that that's precisely what the issue is. Like, it is blowing a gale. It's a storm. It's typical England. It could be summertime, but it does affect the internet connection in most people's houses. It affects mine. Like my stream quality says, internet connection is low. So I infer that it's widespread as well. Like so he will be back, no doubt. I'll hear from him later when he gets online. But if you haven't subscribed to the podcast already, now is your time to do so. It is a free thing that you can do that allows us to keep bringing these episodes to you on a weekly basis. And if it is that you want to join in live, make sure you're going through the questions on the Facebook link that's contained in the description below. And you'll be able to join in live when these go out every Friday. But with that in mind, I shall love you and leave you for now. And I'm sure Bob would do the very same if he was here. Until next time, folks. See you later.